Hello, I'm Arthur Hernandez. Thank you for being with us today. Imagine hearing people screaming, "Lord, don't you care? We are about to die." In Mark chapter 4, beginning in verse 35, on the evening of that same day, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let us go across to the other side of the lake." So they left the crowd, and the disciples got into the boat in which Jesus was already sitting, and they took him with them. Other boats were there too, but suddenly a strong wind blew up, and the waves began to spill over into the boat, so that it was about to fill with water. Well, Jesus was in the back of the boat sleeping with his head on a pillow. And the disciples woke him up and said, "Teacher, don't you care we're about to die?" Well, Jesus stood up and commanded the wind, "Be quiet." And he said to the waves, "Be still." And the wind died down, and there was a great calm. Then Jesus said to his disciples, "Why are you frightened? Have you still no faith?" But they were terribly afraid and said to one another, "Who is this man? Even the wind and the waves obey him." In the King James translation, it says it this way, "And he was in the hinder part of the ship, asleep on a pillow. And they awake him, and they say unto him, Master, Master, carest thou not that we perish? And he arose, and he rebuked the wind, and said unto the sea, Peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And he said unto them, his disciples, Why are ye so fearful? How is it that ye have no faith? But they feared exceedingly, and said to one another, What manner of man is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him? Did you hear what Jesus was saying to his disciples, what he told them? He said, Have you still no faith? How is it that ye have no faith? He didn't ask if they were okay or if they were hurt. He asked them, Why are you scared? In Brother Art's translation, it's more like, What's your excuse for not having faith and being so scared? Well, why was he speaking to them in this manner? Well, let's go back in time to when Jesus met some fishermen and called them to follow him. In Matthew 4, beginning in verse 18, it says, And Jesus, walking by the Sea of Galilee, saw two brethren, Simon called Peter, and Andrew his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishers. And he saith unto them, Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. And they straightway left their nets and followed him. And going on from thence, he saw other two brethren, James the son of Zebedee, and John his brother, in a ship with Zebedee their father, where they were mending their nets. And he called them. And they immediately left the ship and their father and followed him. After that, Jesus traveled through the region of Galilee, teaching in the synagogues and announcing the good news about the kingdom. And he healed every kind of disease and illness. And news about him spread as far as Syria. And the people soon began bringing to him all who were sick. And whatever their sickness or disease, or if they were demon-possessed or epileptic or paralyzed, he healed them all. Large crowds followed him wherever he went. People from Galilee, from the 10 towns, from Jerusalem, from all over Judea, and from east of the Jordan River. And Peter and the disciples traveled with Jesus and followed him. And finally, in Matthew 8, beginning in verse 14, it says, And Jesus was come into Peter's house, and he saw his wife's mother laid and sick of a fever. And he touched her hand, and the fever left her, and she arose and ministered unto them. In other words, he healed her, she got up and started preparing a meal for them. Then when the even came, or when the nighttime came, as it got later, they brought unto him many that were possessed with devils, and he cast out the spirits with his word, and healed all that were sick. Now, let's go back to the storm. Can you see why Jesus was questioning their lack of faith? Here are these men who would become great men of faith, teachers, apostles, writers of the New Testament. And yet here they were terrified, and they were even upset with Jesus because they thought that he didn't care, that they were in danger and near the point of dying. You see, here were these disciples following Jesus and watching him perform all these amazing miracles. They were supposed to be learning so they could all do the things that he did. They were eyewitnesses to all his mighty works. Jesus was telling them, you saw all of the wonders and miracles that happen every day that you've been with me. Don't you have the faith to believe that I can do it again? And what's more, he was teaching them how to do the same things that Jesus did. You know, today, as we continue under the storm of this terrible COVID-19 plague, I've heard that same cry to God. God, don't you care that we're dying? There are many that are scared and terrified as they watch their friends and their loved ones become ill with this disease. You know, sometimes we just hear a little cough or a sneeze and we begin to think, is that the coronavirus? Come on, God, really? Don't you care? But you know, even before the virus, oftentimes we've been guilty of asking God that same thing. Only it might be, God, don't you care that I lost my job? Don't you care that I've been diagnosed with cancer? Don't you care that my marriage is falling apart? You know, I believe that we Christians know and believe that God really does care. We just need to keep reminding ourselves of all the things that we've seen God do in our lives. I mean, remember when you prayed and God healed that friend or that loved one? Remember when you lost your job and how God led you to a better job? How about the time that your brother or your friend was lost and strung out on drugs and God brought him out of that? What about when you and your wife or your husband were on the verge of ending your marriage, but God healed it? And now you're happier and more in love than you could ever imagine. Well, how did that happen? Someone prayed. Someone believed. Somebody had faith that God could fix the impossible. That God could make a way where there seemed to be no way. Somebody remembered all the things that God had done in their past, and they believed that he could do it again. There was a time when the Israelites were about to be attacked by a very large group of enemy kingdoms. These kings had united to come against Israel. In 2 Chronicles 20, beginning in verse 5, it says that Jehoshaphat, and he was the king, Jehoshaphat stood in the assembly of Judah and Jerusalem, in the house of the Lord, before the new court, and said, O Lord God of our fathers, are you not God in heaven? And do you not rule over all the kingdoms of the nations? And in your hands is there not power and might, so that no one is able to withstand you? Are you not our God, who drove out the inhabitants of this land before your people Israel, and gave it to the descendants of Abraham, your friend, forever? And they dwell in it and have built you a sanctuary in it for your name, saying, if disaster comes upon us, sword, judgment, pestilence, or famine, we will stand before this temple and in your presence, Lord, for your name is in this temple, and will cry out to you in our affliction, and you will hear and save us. Well, what was Jehoshaphat doing there? You know, actually, he was reminded God of the great things that God had done in the past for his people. And by doing this, Jehoshaphat and the people also remembered all the great and mighty works that God had done for them. You know, we build our faith every time we remember what God has done for us. When we recall from what he took us out of and to where he has brought us to. And because of what Jesus did for us on the cross, we now have the power through Jesus' name to do all the wonders and miracles that he did. We can come against sickness and disease. We can come against lack and poverty. We can come against all the things that Satan tries to put on us. We can even come against COVID-19. He has made us more than conquerors through his complete victory over the devil. So rather than asking if he cares, let's begin saying things like this. Lord, I thank you that when I had cancer, you cared and you healed me. Thank you that when I was lost in my addiction, you cared and pulled me out of that deep, dark pit. Thank you that when I was on the verge of divorce, you cared and you healed my marriage. When my child was lost and away from you, you cared and you brought her back. Now begin to remember all the things God has done for you. Because remember, you can say something like, when I was at my wit's end, unable to support my family, God, you cared and provided for all of our needs. Remember his faithfulness in fulfilling his promises to you. You know what? It may not have been something that mattered to anyone else, but it was important to you. So God cared. I'm reminded of a time when my 3 kids were very young. We had just gotten home when we found our little poodle behind the stove whimpering. As I reached and pulled him out, I saw that he had a wire that had pierced his neck and was still lodged in there. Blood was trickling out, and our little dog, Pooch was his name, he was in pain. Well, we immediately jumped into the car to take him to the pet hospital. My wife and I in the front, and our babies in the back crying. Yes, they were crying, but they were also praying to God to heal Pooch, their doggie. With their child's faith, they believed that God would heal their puppy. You know, as we were driving, I felt a voice tell me, pull over and park the car. The voice said that there was no need to go to the vet. So I pulled over and I told the kids, check Pooch. They got all excited when they saw that the wire was no longer in his neck. It was just hanging from a little strand of hair. And there was no wound. As a matter of fact, there was not even any blood. 3 little children, 1 little puppy, and God cared. Some 35 years later, when I was diagnosed with cancer, remembering this miracle was one of the things that helped build my strength to fight the cancer. And now, 5 years later, I can say that I am completely cancer-free. And I can tell you without a doubt that God cares. Well, I hope that you've been blessed by this message. Like us and messages on Facebook. Our email is at arthurhernandezministries@gmail.com. And now, may the Lord bless you and take care of you. May the Lord be kind and gracious to you. May the Lord look on you with favor and give you peace. Well, thanks again, and we'll see you next week.